Thank you all so much for joining today for our webcast, Footprints in the Forest, Tracking Oregon's Rarest Wildlife. My name is Danielle Moser, and I'll be your MC for tonight. I'm the Wildlife Program Manager for Oregon Wild. And for those of you who are new to our organization, we are a state-based conservation organization that for over 50 years has worked to protect and restore Oregon's wildlands, wildlife, and waters. I'm honored to introduce our very special guest for tonight, Teri Lysak, who leads Cascadia Wild's Wolverine Tracking Project, a community science project that gathers data on rare carnivores on Mount Hood and teaches classes in wildlife tracking, wild plant foraging, and outdoor skills. She loves being able to help people understand and connect with the natural world. She holds an MS in forest science from Oregon State University. If you're interested in watching this webcast again or want to share it with everyone you know, we will have a recording of this program, which will be emailed out this week and will be posted on our website at oregonwild.org. Please enter your questions anytime in the Q&A section. We usually get a flood of questions right at the end of the presentation, so the sooner you can get yours in, the easier it is for me to organize and answer them. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Teri. And then when Teri's done, I'm going to give 5 minutes on on Oregon Wild's wildlife program and some things we're working on. And then we'll get into the question and answer. So, Teri, I'm going to turn it over to you if you want to unmute and come back on camera. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that
Great.
you can share yours.
Okay, great. Thank you for having me tonight. I'm really
Yeah.
excited to be here. I'm going to start sharing my screen. Um, okay, does that work? Can you all see my
Yeah.
slideshow
Looks
ahead?
great.
Great. So yeah, tonight I'm going to talk about our Wolverine Tracking Project. As Danielle said, it's a community science project that monitors rare carnivores on the Mount Hood National Forest. And also, as Danielle said, yeah, I lead Cascadia Wild. We're a very small nonprofit based in Portland with a mission to connect people with the natural world. So yeah, we teach animal tracking, plant foraging, things to connect people with our place, combining both modern ecology and ancient practices of living and understanding the earth. So most of what we do is the community science project, the Wolverine Tracking Project. And basically how the project works is that volunteers are out in the field collecting data, and then we hand the data over to the people who use it. So it's a very collaborative effort. Um, our partners who use the data are the Mount Hood National Forest, Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, various university researchers, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. The data goes to a number of different purposes depending on research needs. So I say rare carnivores. In specific, we're targeting many different species: Wolverine, Sierra Nevada red fox, gray wolves, Pacific marten, and a couple new ones that aren't carnivores either. Porcupine and western gray squirrel are on the list this year as well. But for this talk, I'm going to be focusing on Wolverine and fox, Sierra Nevada red fox. And I say rare carnivores, but what does it mean for something to be rare? I want to start by unpacking that term just a little bit. So things can be rare naturally. And there's two components of that. You can either have a low population density, so low numbers throughout the whole area where you exist, or you can exist in a very limited area, but have maybe reasonably high numbers in that very particular spot, like a very limited habitat or maybe limited to an island, a geographic area or something like that. But being rare isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it does make a species more vulnerable, for sure. And just because a species is rare doesn't mean it doesn't also have a very important impact on the ecosystem. Rare can also be a negative thing when a species has been negatively impacted by recent ecological changes and has, not done so well. So rare can also have a very negative connotation as well. But just be aware that it has both. And the species that we're going to be talking about are both naturally rare, have very low population densities and large home ranges, and have also had negative things happening to them recently as well. So with that said, Naturally low population densities and large home ranges. When I say low, I want to start by putting that in perspective because that's kind of important into understanding these animals, both Wolverine and Sierra Nevada red fox, as well as wolves and a number of other species. So population density is related to home range size, and here I've overlaid a range, a circle with the range of a wolverine over, I've overlaid that on a map of the Portland metropolitan area. So a male wolverine has a home range of approximately 500 square miles. That even sounds huge. So that means a 2.6 mile radius. So this hypothetical wolverine centered in downtown Portland will hypothetically be traveling all the way between Gresham and Beaverton and back and forth multiple times throughout his whole life. Just a huge area. What does that mean for population size? Well, I said this is one male home range, and actually one male's range will overlap the range of several females. So he's kind of polygamous there. Um, so that's three individuals. And then females can average maybe two kits per litter a year. So if this area could support a healthy wolverine population, an area the size of the Portland metropolitan area would have a population of about seven, just to put everything in perspective. So home range of Sierra Nevada red fox isn't quite as large. In Central Oregon, which is the closest studies to our area, they found an average of 53 square miles. Incidentally, that's also some of the largest home ranges for these foxes. In other areas like California, it's closer to 10 to 15, which means we have very poor habitat, but that's a little aside. We'll get to that a little bit later. But so we'll go with the one that's in our area. So 53 square miles, about a 4 mile radius. Red foxes are monogamous. They mate for life if they can. So this area would be the home of one pair, and top end for a number of young that researchers have found is about three. So this would support five individuals. I centered this circle on our office in Northeast Portland. So if you're a fox leaving the office early one evening and want to find your mate, and all you know is that they're somewhere in this circle in Northeast Portland, it might take you a while to find them. It's a pretty big area. So how do we study them? How do we study animals that are this rare naturally in the ecosystem? So we have three different techniques: tracking, cameras, and scat surveys. Yeah, and in addition to having these huge home ranges, they're also found in wilderness areas that are really, difficult to get to, hard to access. So a lot of this research is relatively new because of these difficulties. But the nice thing about these techniques is they're all non-invasive. We don't have to disturb the animals at all to learn about their presence. So I want to talk a little bit about our survey methods. Yeah, because that's a lot of what we do. Um, yeah, the project started um, by using tracking, and it's still tracking surveys are still a really important part of what Cascadia Wild is about. And by tracking, I simply mean going out and looking for footprints or other sign that the animals have left behind, like you see in this picture. You go out, you look for footprints. It doesn't take any specialized gear, relatively straightforward. Tracking is a skill as old as humankind, but it's still very important today and can still teach us a lot. Relatively simple in concept. Um, yeah, tracking is a great way to learn about wildlife in an area that you can't see directly. You're looking at the signs they leave behind rather than the animals themselves. But tracking is both a skill and an art form and takes a lot of field time to learn. There's a lot involved in it if you've never done any tracking. It's one thing to know what something looks like in a book, but like you see in the pictures on the screen, tracks seldom show up clearly. The coyote track in the left is easily identifiable identifiable as a coyote, but a good tracker can identify something like that picture in the middle as a coyote track as well. So that's where the skill comes in. In tracking, you use many different types of skills. The trail pattern is very important, but things like the depth of the track, where the trail is found, these are all really important considerations as well. So I just want to share a few more pictures to further explain what I'm talking about. If you've ever been on one of our tracking trips, you will recognize this one. Sometimes, sometimes the trail pattern is all that it takes. If you just see the pattern of footprints and no details, you'll be able to recognize this one as a snowshoe hare, just based on that pattern and the size. You can see size from the human boot print there, indicating that these tracks are, that set of four is about, 12 inches or so, just to help put it in perspective. Here's just another fun example, another very common species that we see, a Douglas squirrel. There's the clear tracks on the left. They're about an inch long. And there's the not so clear tracks on the right. When the squirrel is in deep snow for a squirrel, which means it's like maybe a couple inches deep, which happens very frequently. When that happens, you can see that the feet are dragging and the rear feet are landing on top of the front where the snow is already packed down, sort of like what we do when we walk in a line behind each other when we're in the snow because it's easier walking. So yeah, um, lots of nuances, lots of fun. And of course, tracking includes interpreting all sorts of sign, like this feeding sign from a Douglas squirrel feeding on a Douglas fir cone. So lots of things to look at, and teaching tracking and helping people to learn about connecting with the landscape, as well as documenting wildlife is a large part of what we do. But in addition to tracking, we also use a lot of cameras. And most of the pictures that I'll be sharing are from our cameras. We have 21 cameras on the National Forest right now, and volunteers are visiting them once a month just to make sure the site's operational, the camera stays above the snow, and all that sort of thing. Um, just some fun wildlife pictures here. You can get some great pictures from cameras. It's excellent way of documenting things because yeah, there's no question about the pictures that you can bring back. No question about the identification of the animal on the pictures you bring back. The difficulty with cameras is that they only detect a very small area right in front of the camera. And of course, electronics are not reliable, especially in our wet conditions, but we can learn a lot about wildlife from using cameras. And then the other method that we use is scat surveys. So a lot of wildlife biology is actually done in labs these days, analyzing things like DNA, which can tell us a whole lot about animals. Um, yeah, from scat, people can tell ancestry, diet, um, what number of individuals, just the list goes on. So how do you get DNA from an animal without disturbing it? Well, like tracking, you look at the things that the animal left behind. So scat, urine, hair, these all can yield DNA samples that are really important for research. So we ask volunteers to hike trails looking for scat. Yes, we ask people to look for poop and collect it if you think it might be from a red fox. So if you like poking dead things with a stick, this might be up your alley. So for those of you who are curious, yes, there are ways that you can tell who left that scat. Um, in in brief, there's kind of two categories, herbivores, things to look for, shape, size, and contents. So poking it with a stick to see what it's made of. Herbivores is made of green vegetation, very well, finely digested, homogeneous plant matter. It's usually round or oblong. Carnivores tends to be made of fur and bones, or amorphous meat matter, or berries or insects. A lot of carnivores eat those as well, and tends to be long and tubular in shape, like the picture on the right. And the picture on the right is a coyote scat. You can differentiate coyote and other canines from other carnivores because you can see that it's an irregular shape. It has kind of a twisty look, and the ends are very tapered. That makes it coyote. And then scatology is really a science. It's full of diagrams and charts, just like any scientific discipline. And researchers have determined size distributions for the different species that, excuse me, that we use to determine what to collect based on so we can tell based on visual characteristics what's likely to be fox or not. So if you're out on one of our fox surveys, collect something that looks like that scat in the above picture that's less than a half inch or about the less than the diameter of your pinky finger. Um, you might be curious. I said we ask volunteers to hike trails looking for scat. And yeah, animals roam widely through the woods. What's your chance of finding a scat just hiking the trail? Well, actually, pretty darn good. Much more so than you might think on when you first start thinking about it. Because go back to that question about how are you going to find your fox? How are you going to find your partner in all of Northeast Portland? Well, you leave marks so that so you can find each other. So animals do use human trails a lot for the same reason that we use them. There's makes the area a lot easier to travel through, especially canines like coyotes and foxes tend to travel on trails a lot. And they um, then they leave messages marking their territory, telling their partners and other animals out there, all sorts of things, using their scat and urine and other secretions. So trails are a wonderful place to look for scat because these animals tend to leave them where they're going to be found on trails and often visibly noticeable parts of trails, like the intersections or like a little protruding rock, it'll be right on there or something like that. So um, yeah, scat surveys looking for scat along hiking trails is we've we found a number of them so far. So that's the third method that we use for trying to understand these animals. Um, so I want to move on and talk a little bit about, I said our two of our main target species, Wolverine and red fox. And I'll start with Wolverine because that's what the project is named after. And I'll start with this picture because this is kind of where our story starts. As you can tell, this individual is not alive. It is taxidermied. Yes, it is a stuffed Wolverine that was sitting in our office. To give you an idea of scale, those are three-ring binders behind it, standing upright that says Mount Hood Maps. Just to give you perspective, this animal is probably like 2.5 feet long. Um, this individual was killed in 1990. It's the last confirmed Wolverine on the Mount Hood National Forest, unfortunately. So even though I run a project called the Wolverine Tracking Project, there are no Wolverine on Mount Hood. Just, yeah, for the record. But there have been many, many reports of them. So this was 1990. Think back to 1990. There's no cell phones, there's no digital cameras. Biologists repeatedly got reports from the public, so and so saw Wolverine tracks. They sound credible, sort of. And the biologist is like, well, do I believe them? Do they know what they're talking about? I don't know. It's a really hard position to be in. Um, the only way to know for sure whether the animal is there is for a trained biologist to actually conduct a survey. And given what you now know about how rare wolverine are and where living in a wilderness area like the Mount Hood, that is really hard to do and never actually happened. So story goes on, are they here? Are they not? One was killed in 1990. Are they here? Are they not? Around 2002, the biologist from Mount Hood National Forest got another story that sounded credible, and a group of trackers from Cascadia Wild decided to go and see if they could confirm. And see if they could actually bring back some concrete evidence about whether that sighting was credible, verifiable or not. And that's how the project got formed. Unfortunately, they were not successful. And to date, like I said, we have not seen any Wolverine on Mount Hood. However, we think it's still important to have a monitoring system in place to detect them when or if they come here, and we're going to continue to keep a lookout. So why are we interested in them? Um, Wolverine are one of those species that used to be a lot more widespread, but now they're gone from a lot of their historic range, like a number of animals, unfortunately. There's many reasons for why this happened, and to understand this, let's start by looking a little bit more into Wolverine natural history. So what do we know about Wolverine? Well, the first one we already talked about. They have an average home range of huge, 500 square miles or so. Um, Small populations are just more vulnerable in general. So vulnerable to chance events like a random accident or not finding a mate or something. I mean, think about it. If you have a population of 100 individuals and one of them is killed in an accident, it's not that big of a deal. If you have a population of 7 individuals and one of them gets killed, that's kind of a big deal. So the smaller the population size, the more vulnerable they are to begin with, and they can spiral downhill. And also with small populations, of course, you have problems with genetic inbreeding, which also puts them in a very vulnerable position. So small population size. Let's talk about the other two. So Wolverine are primarily scavengers. Scavenger means that they eat things that are already dead. They don't necessarily go hunting for their food. They roam the landscape looking for those carcasses that are already dead and probably pretty stinky and smelly as well. So carcasses like that aren't abundant. So if you want to be primarily a scavenger, you have to be able to travel very, very long distances, roaming the landscape widely, searching for your food. You have to be fierce enough, strong enough to retrieve it from where it is. Like maybe that deer was killed by a rock slide and now it's half buried. You have to be able to get to it. Most importantly, you have to be able to defend that carcass from other animals because if there's easy food on the landscape, everyone wants to eat it. So Wolverine don't back down from anything. Very fierce temperament. Um, Somewhere on YouTube, I know I saw a video before of a wolverine and a grizzly bear uh, going after the same carcass, and guess who won? The wolverine, like a small little 3 foot animal against a grizzly bear. I couldn't find that video again to share with you, but there's a lot of others out there that aren't quite so scientific. Like this one, the ultimate fight, grizzly versus Wolverine, who will win? So there's a lot of folklore out there around Wolverines, especially the Marvel character with the big claws and yeah. But there's also a lot of truth to that as well. They are yeah, they're not afraid of anything, really. They can take on anything. And this is actually one of the reasons for their extirpation from a lot of areas because of trapping. So if you're not used to backing down, you're not afraid of a trap, which a trap is something that Wolverine actually can't take on so well. So trapping was a big issue, but also habitat loss, human encroachment in general, and just all the other ecosystem changes that have happened that affect top predators and the abundance of carcasses on the landscape and everything else. So, okay, going back to our scientific outlook here. Um, the last one is the important thing moving forward. Wolverine live in mountainous areas and they really need deep snowpack into May for denning sites and food storage. And that makes them really vulnerable in the face of changing climate. So they're a snow adapted species. If you look at the picture, the picture here is Wolverine tracks on Mount Adams. And look at the size of those feet. They're snowshoes. They're built for walking on snow. They're well adapted for cold. Um, and the dens kind of need protection of snow to keep the young safe in them until the young are able to move around in May. And also, if you think of their food, a lot of hoofed animals are killed during the winter. That's kind of their hard time of year when there's not a lot of food and it's cold and things are hard. So um, the longer there's snow, the more those carcasses can stay fresh later into the spring and summer, so Wolverine can eat them. The longer those carcasses stay fresh, the better the Wolverine do. So that's another reason they're kind of tied to that snowpack as well. There is good news. So with protections in place against trapping, Wolverine have actually been recovering in Washington. So I'm going to show you a video next that's from Cascade Carnivore Project, who has a research organization that's been doing a lot of studies on both Wolverine and Sierra Nevada red fox in Washington. And this was really fun. Uh-oh, why is this not showing? Are you guys seeing a video or not?
No, we're not.
Ooh,
I don't even see like the beginning of a video in which
yeah.
I play.
Um, I apologize. It was a really cute video. You'll have to take my word for it. Um,
You know
so
what we could maybe do, Terry? So we send out the recording. We might be able to include the video somehow if you have a link to it, if it's on YouTube or any. Anyway, you and I can
I'll
talk
try
about it.
and I'll
We'll
try
figure
and
it
get to it after I'm done. How's
out.
that
Okay,
when I stop sharing
sounds
or
good.
when I get out of here? But yeah, the 19 2018, they got a video of a family, a mom and two adorable kits from the Douglas O Wilderness area just south of the I-90 corridor up in Washington. And this was really important um, because it was a family. So the youngster that I showed you before, the taxidermied Wolverine that was in our office, he was a 2-year-old male. So he was likely just one individual dispersing, likely just set out from his parents' home and was trying to find a place to settle down by himself. That's why he was in a new area. But with a mom giving birth to kits, that means they're going to stay. And that shows that Wolverine are actually expanding their range, which is really exciting. And then even more exciting for us, one day I got this picture in my inbox in the spring of 2023. And the location wasn't released at the time because we didn't know if this individual was still in the area and we wanted to protect it. And even the person who took the pictures didn't want his name out because he's like, everyone knows where I fish. They might go after, they might find it that way. But this individual was photographed in an island in the Columbia just across from Blue Lake Park in Gresham. It's the island that is right next to the island that the 205 bridge rests on. This animal is way far out of its normal habitat. Um, of mountain wilderness areas. So this animal is likely a young male dispersing, trying to find a new habitat. I mean, yeah, Wolverine can easily travel like 50 to 100 miles a day, no problem. But yeah, a Wolverine in Oregon, again, in Western Oregon, again, not just the Blue Mountains, way over on the eastern side of the state. So Tom got several pictures, and we got of this individual, and we saw tracks in the area where he saw them. So confirmed Wolverine in Western Oregon. This individual continued south. Here's some more pictures from the Colton area, if you know where that is. And here's a map just of the different sightings throughout that week as the individual moved right through the city of Portland. Pretty amazing. So yeah, one person actually reported seeing him standing waiting by the side of the road for the cars to pass before he crossed the road. So kind of a savvy individual. He was last seen on Santiam Pass and then down in California. Then next spring, another individual, or I should say a Wolverine, was again seen in the Willamette Valley and along in the Coast Range and on the coast, the Oregon coast, presumably the same individual. We don't know for sure, but presumably he traveled down to California, didn't find a mate, came back, was still searching. But, that DNA evidence would have been really helpful to try and figure that out. Here's something kind of ironic. What happens when a rare animal interferes with another rare animal? So there's a bird called a snowy plover that nests on the beaches on the coast that is very vulnerable now that there's a lot more predators on the beaches. They just nest in exposed areas. So ODFW has been doing a lot of work trying to protect them and placing traps for feral cats and dogs and things to try and protect the snowy plover populations. So of course, Wolverine, not being afraid of anything, got caught in one of those traps to protect snowy plover, and he was relocated to a safe place, and I haven't heard what happened to him since. So, but yes, we hope that one day Wolverine will return to Mount Hood, and this project has a monitoring system in place because you never know until you look. And with that, I want to go into how do you look? How do you, so seeing a Wolverine is one thing, and that would be, I showed you the pictures. It's about the size of a medium dog, but very heavy set, long, with very short legs and kind of the stripe on its back. How do you identify the tracks, which are you're more likely to be able to see? Tracks stick around in the environment for a lot longer than the animal. So identifying Wolverine tracks, size. Remember those snow adapted feet? Look at this scale here. Wolverine tracks are about 4 inches long. If I were to curl my fingers like this, the tracks are about as wide as my hand and as long as my hand if I curled my fingers. So look for something big. Wolverine are part of the mustelid family or weasel family, so they have the same characteristics as mink and otter and long-tailed weasels and all of them. They have 5 toes kind of in an even arc across above or around, I guess, a heel pad that's an inverted U. So that's what you're looking for with the tracks. And then they also have a very unique trail pattern as well. And I'm going to back up a little bit to give you a quick tracking lesson. There's 2 types of trail patterns. Animals can walk like we do, which leave a very regular right, left. Or animals with short legs, like Wolverine, tend to have a jumping pattern where you have groups of 4. So this is a typical Wolverine pattern with kind of these lines of tracks at angles to the direction of travel. But if you see something that looks like this with big feet and a lot of feet for the area that you would expect, a very short stride, then that's what you're looking for with Wolverine. And I hope you all see them, and I hope that someday they will return to our area. Okay, I still have a little bit of time to talk about Sierra Nevada red fox because they're one of the other species that we're really interested in. And I want to start by saying that there are 2 species of fox in Northwest Oregon, and they are both named by their color. There's a gray fox and there's a red fox. And this is really confusing because gray fox also have red in them, and red fox aren't necessarily red. This is another Sierra Nevada red fox that is all black. Here's another black individual in the summertime, not looking quite so fluffy. The black ones are often called silver phase because they have kind of a silver sheen to the longer guard hairs on their fur. Another common coloration is what's called a cross fox, where they're red but they have a lot of gray on their back. Here's another cross fox. Yeah, so they come in many different colors, not necessarily red, but they're all part of the species called red fox. So wrap your brain around that one. Red fox are one of the most widely distributed carnivores in the world. So here we're not talking about the whole species, we're talking about a subspecies. And the characteristics of the subspecies aren't things that can be seen in the field. If you were just to look at the foxes, you couldn't tell the Sierra Nevada subspecies from any other red fox. for the most part, but it's more about all the physiological adaptations and the genetic differences that help the species adapt to different areas. So let's start with a little bit of history. How do a species form a subspecies, and why is this important? So to form a subspecies, you need a group that is isolated for a very long period of time. And the maps that I'm going to show you are taken from work done by Keith Aubrey and Benjamin Sachs, who are the primary researchers of Sierra Nevada red fox, in a publication written up in Science Findings. So the story starts long time ago during the Ice Age. Um, of, as most of you know, when the ice was here, the the oceans receded and a land bridge formed to Asia, and foxes crossed. Okay, ice melts. Foxes spread throughout the continent. Ice comes back. Things get isolated. So other foxes migrate across the Bering Land Bridge. And down here in this southern refugia of stuff beneath the glaciers, you get foxes splitting into two different groups because the middle of the continent becomes a desert, and yeah, they don't do well with desert. These are cold adapted species, um, because of course cold adapted. This is the Ice Age, so you get a distinctly different western and eastern subclades here. So ice melts. The western subclade does what you might think as climate gets warmer, as the ice melts, they move up the mountaintops to the areas that are like that they're adapted to. The eastern clade, on the other hand, becomes some of them move up into the boreal areas in northern Canada, and some of them become more adapted and become widespread throughout the eastern United States, and eventually somehow make their way to the Western United States as well. So here in the West, we now have very distinct populations that have been separated for tens of thousands of years, literally. You have some that are still adapted to cold who live on the high mountaintops, and you have lowland ones who are actually now a mix of native ones transported from the eastern United States in for farming, and maybe some European ones that were brought over here for hunting and for farming as well. So they're a mix of things. But it's interesting that there has been very little interbreeding between the two, even though they live in very close proximity. That's been found in the Cascades, as well as areas like Yellowstone as well. You have some that live in the mountains, and you have some in the lowlands, and they're very distinct, which indicates that they're all adapted to their unique environments. Very, they're actually very different animals. So let's focus a little bit more on that Western montane clade, because it's really three different species. You have the Rocky Mountains, which are loosely, yeah, a chain where the foxes can move back and forth between different mountaintops scattered throughout there. You have the Washington Cascades, where you have Rocky Mountain subspecies, sorry, Cascade subspecies up in Washington. You have the Sierra, and then you have the Sierra Nevada subspecies down in the Sierra Nevadas, which actually it was not until 1991 that researchers showed that they were actually still there. Thought that they were actually might be extirpated from the area as well. And I give away the answer here, but the question is, for a long time was, what are the ones in Oregon? So habitat-wise, they're more connected to, or they're more similar to the ones in Washington. But if you look at population connectivity, there's a big barrier of the Columbia River right here that's kind of hard for a fox to cross. So that question had to wait until not the 1990s, but to the 2010s with the advance of all this genetic research, because it's through the genetics that people can really get into that relationship. And the scat samples that were collected in this project as well as others throughout the Oregon Cascades, found that they were indeed the Sierra Nevada red fox populations. The Columbia creates a very big barrier to foxes, and knowing these different populations and knowing where they can disperse and go to is a really important part of managing for them. I'm
Teri,
gonna,
five minute warning.
okay,
You asked for. Yeah.
cool, thank you. I'm gonna skip this slide for a little bit because I think I'm gonna talk about it a lot here. I'll wrap this up soon. So let's focus a little bit more on Oregon because this is where it kind of gets interesting. So this is a vegetation map of Oregon. Before I just drew a big circle over the whole Cascades, now let's hone in a little bit more on habitat. So fox like open areas. They don't like dense forest. They need those edges, those brushy areas. There's areas where there's not any trees. That's the habitat they like. So if you think of the vegetation in Oregon, there's open areas in the Willamette Valley and lowland areas in the sagebrush area. And the other area that is completely disconnected from those is once you get on all the high mountaintops in the alpine area. So that's where these foxes are located. And you can see there's not a whole lot of habitat. You can barely even see those areas on the map. And they're not connected. So a lot of animals live in what's called a metapopulation structure, where you have different populations in different areas that are separated by non-suitable habitat, and you need animals to disperse back and forth between these populations. So fox exist in, well, on the larger scale, there's some distinct populations in Oregon and California. And then if you look closer in Oregon, um, the right part, or sorry, the left part of this map shows all their study sites. The left part shows some genetic markers of distinctness, I'll call it. And you can see that Mount Hood up at the top here, the top two clusters tend to be a little distinctly different from the ones below. So even within Oregon, on the tops of the different mountaintops, we need connectivity, and it looks like that might be a problem based on some of this research, based on yeah, what's happening right now. I'm losing my thought as I'm trying to hurry. So yeah, diversity isn't just at the species level. Animals need genetic diversity in order to adapt to new environments and new circumstances. And isolated populations like this need corridors open so that their populations can connect with others and to maintain that metapopulation structure between mountains. So you can't just focus on one area. Everything is interconnected. So, like I said, yeah, small populations are vulnerable. With climate change, the cold adapted species is vulnerable. The competition from coyotes, from roads connecting, coyotes are becoming a lot more common. There's roads connecting lowlands and alpine areas that weren't there. So a lot of things in the ecosystem is changing that's affecting these foxes right now, but we hope that they're going to stay part of our environment. So I'll just have one last thought. The Wolverine Tracking Project, there's a lot of good research or a lot of good data that has been collected that has contributed to all of this research and all of this understanding. But more important, in my perspective, maybe just as important, both are important. We also want you to be involved. It's really about connecting people with the natural world, because the more people that are connected and knowledgeable and involved, the more people will actually care about it at a legislative level and at many different levels as well. So yeah, we want to get you involved. Yeah, Indigenous people all over the world have considered animals to be their teachers, and I think this remains very true even today on many different levels. So with that, I just want to say thank you all for coming, and I hope you learned something, and yeah, I hope you enjoyed the presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much, Teri. That was wonderful. I learned a lot, so thank you. So like I said, I'm going to take just 5 minutes and then we'll get into Q&A. But I feel like yours was a great segue into what I'm going to talk about, because I think that there's obviously the education of the public and that getting in that involved in connection to nature. And then for Oregon Wild, in our focus, which is then once you have that engaged public who understands, especially the issues plaguing our wildlife and their habitats, now raising those voices in advocacy and in the ways in which policies are made in Oregon to support that work. And so I want to start off and to talk about a little bit about, and Teri did such a great job, especially calling out specific species that are rare and rare, especially due to ecological or human caused reasons. And so I want to even take a further step back and talk about, the loss of species or so many species in decline in Oregon. I'm sure many of you have heard about the global extinction crisis. And while that is definitely something affecting us around the world, it is here at our doorstep as well in Oregon. And even over the last decade, Oregon has gone from having 294 species that are in decline to over 300. Our most recent assessment in Oregon has put it about 321. And actually, Teri called it out, but Sierra Nevada red fox is one of them, Wolverine, porcupine. This used to be a common species, is now on the list of species of greatest conservation need. And so, while that news is depressing, it definitely depresses me. I also know that there's work to be done and there's things that we can do to support their recovery and to support the habitats that sustain these species. And so I think the other thing to say about kind of the urgency of, what are we doing now and why now is the time to act? Unfortunately, things happening at the federal level. We have, the Trump administration who has already cut funding for so many important programs that support the recovery of imperiled and vulnerable species and habitats. And, currently they have an open commenting period for rolling back the Endangered Species Act. The comment period actually ends on Monday. So if you haven't commented, please go and say why we need the Endangered Species Act. But you put all of this together, and it really underscores for Oregon Wild and so many of our partners in conservation why we need a solution to combat extinction and to support species recovery. And so I want to quickly talk about landmark legislation that we are working on together with, wildlife conservation organizations, hunting organizations, fishing, recreational groups, businesses. And this is a bill to get dedicated funding for the recovery of the most imperiled and vulnerable species and habitats in Oregon. The work of Cascadia Wild is so incredibly important to contributing the research and surveys and information to the state about what's happening. But to be completely honest, ODFW lacks so many resources to actually do the recovery work for porcupine and Sierra Nevada red fox, and the list goes on and on. And so this has been a long time problem, that many advocates have been trying to solve for. Finding dedicated funding is always a tough thing to go after, but the time is now. Extinction is intensifying, federal cuts again at the federal level. And so the solution and the bill that we are working on, again, together with dozens of partners across the state, is a bill that would raise our statewide tourism tax. So a tax that you pay on a hotel room or Airbnb or a campsite by 1.25%. It would take the total to 2.75%, which would still be the third lowest in the country. But even with that increase and those funds going directly to fish, wildlife, and habitat conservation, we can make significant strides in combating extinction and supporting Oregon's natural legacy, which, to be fair, is inextricably linked to outdoor recreation and tourism. I mean, this is what draws so many people to Oregon in the first place, and we want to just make sure that those revenues are being reinvested back into that driver, namely natural resources and wildlife. And so, I could talk for hours about this legislation. I won't do that. I know we want to get into the questions for Teri, but I just want to underscore how important this is. While we haven't had dedicated funding, we've seen more and more species in decline. And so that's why so many of these groups have come together and said the time is now to act. So the final thing is what can you do? And there's so much you can do. First thing, you can go on Oregon Wild's website or go to our campaign website, 1% for Wildlife. Check it out, get better informed about what we're doing and the effort there. We're having a big advocacy day at the Capitol in Salem on February 11th. So go on our website, you can sign up for that action day. Write your state legislators. This is a bipartisan bill. It has support from Democrats and Republicans, from Multnomah County out to Malheur County across Oregon. And so, but we still need to advocate to our legislators and to the governor that this is really important to us and important to our natural legacy and important to our economy, which really depends on a healthy environment and abundant wildlife. And then finally, if you're on social media, Oregon Wild is sharing so much relevant social media content these days, so definitely comment, share it. Um, and the final thing I want to say about this funding bill, and again, happy to answer questions about what this would fund. But one thing I know for sure is it would go to a grant making program called the Oregon Conservation and Recreation Fund, which goes to organizations like Cascadia Wild that are out there doing this important education and research work to support species conservation. So the list goes on and on about what this legislation would do, but we need everybody's help to get it passed and support, those most vulnerable species and habitats in Oregon. So I'm going to leave it there and stop sharing my screen. And Teri, you can come back on and we'll get to questions. Okay, we've got a few. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think you answered this about Wolverine, but just said how many Wolverine and gray wolves do you figure in the Mount Hood area? We obviously know that about Wolverine now, but any sense on gray wolves?
There's two packs on the Mount Hood, well, one pack and two individuals on the Mount Hood National Forest right now. So I think
Great.
that's five.
Yeah. Um, okay, let's see. Fabulous presentation. Do you do any scat analysis or do you send samples out to various labs?
Yeah, we give it to ODFW who does all the analysis or to other researchers. Yeah, we don't do any of that ourselves.
Wonderful. Okay, let's see. Do foxes or muscelids defecate repeatedly in the same place? If so, are those latrine characteristics to the species like on a raised rock or other preferred microsites?
Um, yes, they go in the same place, but it's not really the idea of a latrine. So animals like a raccoon will use a latrine and you get like this huge pile of scat at the base of a tree or something like that. Um, Canines and mustelids use it very strategically for marking, which sometimes means they're going in the same place or like scatting on top of another animal's or urinating on top of another animal's scat, like over marking. So it's strategic, but yes, you can find more than one in one location.
Right. Has Cascadia Wild used detection dogs for scat surveys?
Nope, we have not gotten into that at all.
Oh,
Yeah, I know that's another very important non-invasive monitoring technique as well. That's
yeah.
very valuable. Yep.
Yeah, and Oregon Wild and many others have worked with the rogue detection team to do similar stuff to that with scat surveys. I know. Okay, why would the trapped wolverine be relocated when it would be apparently exercising its range? Maybe just relocated to a nearby safe location?
Yeah, exactly.
Gotcha.
Exactly. And I think they relocated to a place that was a little less populated.
This isn't a question, but maybe you have a comment about it that says there's a Sierra Nevada red fox that hangs out at the Mount Bachelor ski area. The Deschutes National Forest monitors it. So not sure if you have thoughts about that, but good information from that person.
Yeah, yep, that's one. Yeah, they're known to hang out near the parking areas both around Mount Bachelor and Mount Rainier as well.
Oh yeah.
Not around Mount Hood though. They seem
Mm.
to be keeping to themselves around here. I don't know
Ah.
why.
Hmm.
I don't
Oh,
know
and
what
they
this is.
made another comment that said people have been asked not to feed it, which
Yeah,
is that's a good lesson for all kinds of wildlife.
yeah.
Good PSA. Let's see. We live in Corvallis suburb and have camera documented fox come onto our deck every night or two. Is their population really a concern?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. What exactly are the lowland foxes? They're definitely a distinct thing from the montane Sierra Nevada red fox.
Um,
Um, and they're thought to be a mixture of like a more widespread, more, you know, um, not as adapted to a very specific habitat, very widespread
mhm.
subspecies. So no, there's no concern over the ones in the Willamette Valley.
Gotcha.
They are doing just fine. They're very adaptable to human environments.
Well, and apparently that one Wolverine was too. I know
Yeah.
I live in Northeast Portland and I was there like and heard about the Columbia River one. And then I was in Manzanita when the other one or the same one, I guess, came to the coast. And I was just like, this is baffling, like, because again, there's so much talk about and they do need remote wilderness and all those things are still true. But I think this one was obviously an adventure
Right.
out.
And that's the big difference between something settling down and raising a family there. And that was like the video with the kits that I wanted to show you guys, because that's where they need the habitat that they need. If it's just a young, like trying to find a place to settle down, they can go anywhere.
Yeah.
They're in those strange areas trying to find the space that they like.
Yeah. This is my question. Do you get updates? You mentioned the one in the blues, and I think it was named Stormy. Do you get updates about Stormy the Wolverine? You know, hearing about how, because I think that was the lone Wolverine for a while, even in Eastern Oregon. So didn't know if you
Yeah,
had updates
I
about that
haven't
one. Yeah.
I haven't heard any updates on him.
Yeah.
No.
Okay, a couple more questions. Let's see. Um, let's see. Wolverine at Northeast I don't know if that meant California, Wolverine at Northeast California baited camera trap. No, this must be a location. I'm sorry. I don't know if this person means California or a specific, maybe I'm missing this, but is this thought to be your disperser who returned to Oregon rather than I think it means California resident. They were believed extirpated from California. True.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. That was a little bit of a convoluted. I read that.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, there was one down in California for a number of years that showed up unexpectedly and
Okay.
yeah, hung out for a number of years. I don't remember where, somewhere in Southern California, I think. Yeah, and I don't think anyone ever really knew where it came
Hmm.
from.
Okay. Um, Can you explain if there's a collaboration between Cascadia Wild and SNRF surveys in Central Oregon conducted during summer 2025? And that's Sierra Nevada Red Fox surveys, is what that was.
Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife has been doing surveys in a number of different areas. So we have just been focusing on Mount Hood so far. We'd like to expand to more Central Oregon. Um, this summer, maybe that will happen. But in 2025, ODFW was looking for volunteers and they were funding a grad student who was doing research. Wait, was that was 2024. ODFW has had ongoing research in the Deschutes National Forest and elsewhere on Sierra Nevada red fox.
Great. Has anyone done a DNA test on the foxes at Summer Lake?
I'm not sure where Summer Lake is.
I think it's in Central Cascades, so you might not be as privy to that information. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I don't know. My
Have
geography
you-
outside Mount Hood gets
yeah.
sketchy.
I know there's a lot of like Clear Lake, Summer, you're like that there's lots of those, but I believe that one's Central Cascades, but I'd have to double check.
Okay. Yeah, if it's above 4,000 feet in the Cascades, it's probably an area that they've been sampling or trying to survey at any rate.
Yeah. Have you noticed changes in fisher cat populations since the decline of porcupine populations? And do you know anywhere I could find more information?
Um, that's another good question. We don't have fisher in this area. They're thought to be
Mhm.
gone from this area. They were introduced into the Washington Cascades, the Southern Washington Cascades, a couple years ago, and I don't have a contact for that at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the other population would be down in Southwest Oregon. There's
Yeah,
a
I
native
think that's right.
population and a population that was introduced a number of years ago.
Yep.
So yeah, maybe reach out to Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife and see who to contact about that.
Yep.
Or maybe someone from Oregon Wild would
Yeah.
know more.
I mean, I think the information's new about the porcupines, or at least documented in terms of their decline. So I don't know if then it's been exactly correlated yet to fishers, but or their impact to fishers. So yeah, maybe more to come on that. And maybe again, something that if the funding bill that I'm working on goes through, that there will be more funding for ODFW to do that type of research, especially on species where they lack really basic data in other surveys. They call them species of greatest information need. There's actually a lot of species in Oregon that they don't have enough scientific evidence or data to really say how a population is doing or not doing. So um, it's a little
Yeah.
bit of a digression, but and then finally, oh, Central Oregon on the east side, I think is Summer Lake. Yep, that's right. Okay, thank you, Michael. And then are there ways people can get involved with the tracking projects?
Yes. Yeah, I forgot to include that. So we have two different survey seasons, summer and winter. So the winter survey season started in November, so you had to go through the trainings in November to help out this winter. But if you want to help out in May, we'll be doing trainings for summer. So we'll doing cameras and probably some wolf tracking on the east side of the forest in the summer. And then next November, if you want to do some tracking in the snow with us or camera stuff, that's the time to check that out as well. So yeah, we would love to have you involved. Snow is the excellent place to do tracking.
Yeah,
So
amazing.
join
And
us
then
next winter.
great. Final question was, should we use iNaturalist to report porcupine sightings? And I would say yes. I think
Yes.
ODFW definitely uses that information.
With porcupine in particular, ODFW actually has a specific reporting form as well, because that's something that they're very interested in. So if you see porcupine, go to their website
Yeah,
or contact me and I'll help you find it. Because
great.
porcupine is something we're trying to learn a lot more about right now.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, I mean, I was personally happy to see, not happy to see that it was on the species of greatest conservation need, but I think observationally people have noticed a decline. So I was happy to see that it was being
Addressed.
reflected in the seriousness of its decline, I guess is how I would say. I do not want to see more species in decline, but I was happy that they're taking it seriously because I think a lot, just sort of anecdotally, we were hearing a lot of like, I used to see a lot of porcupine here and not anymore. So, um, anyway, but hopefully we can do more in these surveys and otherwise to support all these species. So, thank you so much, Teri. This was wonderful, and I think everyone enjoyed it as I'm hearing and reading in the comments. And like I said, the recording will be sent out. And thank you all so much. And this is our last webcast before the holidays and the new year. So everyone, well wishes for the end of the year and happy new year. And we'll see you in 2026. So thanks so much. Thank you, Teri. It was nice meeting
Thank you
you.
so much for having me.
Absolutely. Have a good evening. Bye.